my desire to give back actually comes from my father. My father had no money. He could never give money. If he had a dime left in his pocket, that was a miracle. But he gave his time. So if some member of our community, rural community died, guess who was the first one there? My dad. And when a farmer was ill and he couldn't farm his land, guess who was the first one there? And so I saw this growing up. My mother would cook for these people. She would use her garden vegetables or whatever to make dishes for them. So neither of my parents could give a dime, but they could give of their time. And so it was just something I saw in my home. But the one thing that happened that made all the difference in the world was an incident that occurred in Enid, Oklahoma when I was in grade school. And my father and I were in our 1936 Ford that worked once in a while. And we finished at the feed store, and then he took me to the Carnegie Library. I'd been there before because we couldn't afford books, so that's where we checked out some books to read. And he came around, opened my side of the car door, and he took my hand and he led me up the steps of that beautiful old building. And he stood there and said, "I have a story I want to tell you." He told me about a man named Andrew Carnegie, a very controversial man. He said that he grew up in poverty, and when he was older, he made a fortune in steel, and he actually owned steel mills. As he aged, he decided that he wanted to take care of his family, so he did trusts or whatever, and he wanted to give his money away before he died. Now, after taking care of his family, he ended up with $350 million left over. This was in 1916 or 17, so sometime in that decade. And he decided that what he wanted to do was build libraries across the United States. Now, what is interesting to me is that $350 million back then is equivalent to maybe close to $3 billion today. Talk about your dollar devaluing. There you have it. So he put together a committee who did all of the work because he was becoming quite ill. And they would buy the lot, build the building, beautiful old buildings. They would purchase the books, they would hire the staff and operate it for 1 year and then turn it over to the city. He looked at me that day and he finished this lesson about this man named Andrew Carnegie, and he said something that I think is shocking for a man who had an 8th grade education and a man who had no money. Because you don't hear this today. He said, "Hun, I want you to always respect the wealthy because they usually give back."